Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Revere School Committee. Please rise and salute the flag. Roll call the members.
Mrs. Bronston Rizzo.
Here.
Mr. D'Ambrosio.
Here.
Mr. Ferranti.
Here.
Ms. Gravellisi.
Here.
Mr. Sinella.
Present.
Ms. Ty.
Here.
Mayor.
Here. Start this evening's meeting with the consent calendar. Mrs. Rizzo.
Mr. Mayor, can we just back up to recognitions?
Right.
Unfortunately, not only in our district, our city has lost two amazing women this past month. Susan Garino has worked in our cafeteria, and you know, she loved her job. There wasn't any time that she was upset. She was, the kids loved her. She was so welcoming, and it's a great loss. I feel bad for our Paul Revere. Wasn't she at Paul Revere? No, I'm sorry, Romney. Community, also her co-workers, and Cheryl Cole. She is a big loss. And then the other one is Priscilla Nicholson, who she may not have worked in our district, but she has been a big part of this district, giving not just, she's been on the school council at Garfield and has helped them immensely in getting donations for them. She has done so much in the city that besides just her laugh and her smile, she has started the Santa Walk. There's not a playground in the city that she wasn't the first one to be there to build. If you go down Sargent Street to the underpass, Priscilla was the one that got that ball rolling and saw it through. There's just a million different things that I'm sure each one of us can talk about Priscilla, and she'll definitely be missed along with Susan Garino. So at this time, I ask for a moment of silence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Rizzo. We'll go now to the consent calendar.
Motion to accept the consent calendar.
Motion made by Mrs. Rizzo.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Gravellisi. Roll call the members.
Mrs. Bronston Rizzo.
Yes.
Mr. D'Ambrosio.
Yes.
Mr. Ferranti.
Yes.
Ms. Gravellisi.
Yes.
Mr. Sinella.
Yes.
Ms. Ty.
Yes.
Mayor Arrigo.
Yes. We'll move on to public speak. Seeing no members of the audience.
Mr. Mayor, there is a member on
Zoom.
Zoom.
Okay, and if anyone on Zoom would like to speak, please raise your hand, and we will make sure that you are promoted to be able to speak.
So Susan Buckley is coming on. Susan, are you able to talk?
I am. You would think I would have this down pat by now, Dr. Kelly, but all right. It looks like I have two videos for some reason. Am I showing twice?
You are. It's because you're on your video and the school committee video, but it will show on
so
YouTube as just you.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to take the time to address the school committee. My name is Susan Buckley. I am the Revere Paraprofessionals Union President. And at this time, I just wanted to share some quotes with the school committee that have a lot to do with our contract negotiations, and they just feel like their voice is not always heard, and they don't often have the time to participate. A lot of them work second jobs, so I've chosen to be their voice, and we sent out something to get some quotes for them on why we would like to have, these are quotes from our union members on why we think we should have a 6-hour workday versus a 3-hour and 55-minute workday. First off, a lot of them are feeling the pain that it stinks that a lot of our paras need to leave the district to go seek full-time employment in other places. Also, another quote, the substitutes, parent liaisons, and medical aides are now full-time, and you would think that those of us that work with the most vulnerable students would be full-time, seeing the need is there, especially coming out of COVID, and we are seeing a lot of behavioral problems and social-emotional issues with some children, especially the youngest, that are now entering school for the first time. Another quote from another one of our union members, as paras, we are working during COVID-19 with students that don't understand COVID-19 restrictions. I work part-time. If I get sick, I don't have health insurance if I need to stay out and seek medical attention. Another quote, paras build bonds with children, and when we don't start and finish their day with them, it can trigger negative behaviors. Next, COVID-19 has left a lasting impact on our youngest students in pre-K through grade 1. These children have never been in a classroom setting, and our teachers need extra help now more than ever navigating daily routines and giving our students the social emotional support we need. Lots of us are seeing school adjustment counselors basically running like chickens with their heads cut off from classroom to classroom, and the K and 1 and the small learning groups, they just don't have the support, and we don't think these school adjustment counselors can keep up, and I think they think having a para full-time in the classroom would definitely help in situations like that, so when the teacher needs to diffuse situations. Our kids are the most vulnerable in the district, yet they are never given the full attention they deserve. They need staff that can help. And then lastly, the district could ensure that students have the support they need if they redistribute the hours of the vacant para positions to the existing staff and make them 6.5 hours a day instead of the 3.55. Our kids need us there, and the district is robbing them of the support by not doing this. I will not take up much more time, but I just thought during negotiations, I wanted to take this opportunity because I'm getting lots of paras reaching out to me, and I just wanted to share their perspective because they don't have a voice at the table. So that's it, and I want to thank you guys for your time and letting me come in and speak on behalf of my union.
Thank you for your comments. We'll move on to any other members of the public that would like to speak.
None on the Zoom.
Okay. We will close that portion of the meeting and move to the student representative report. Elney has joined us via Zoom. Thank you for being on with us, and we look forward to hearing your update.
Thank you very much. This is my first time, so I'm just a little bit nervous, but please be patient with me. Are you guys able to hear me?
Yep, we can hear you just great.
So there have been a couple issues going on in the school. I know there's been like a TikTok trend that's been going on with a lot of kids doing stealing a lot of things in school and acting not rationally, but all of us have been blamed for the trouble, and a lot of students have gone to me and spoken out how they feel as if they shouldn't be punished for the other students who have been acting irrationally. For example, there are going to be restrictions such as you're not going to be able to walk outside in the hallways. And as a junior, I can say that there's a lot of stress for the upperclassmen who have to work a lot of emotional stress and a lot of mental health stress, especially after the pandemic. And we feel like being able to walk outside and just around the school is able to like help us calm down a little bit. Excuse me, because this is my first time. There's also been some other problems, such as with transportation with the bus. We know there's been issues with transportation, and we feel as though that's going to be an issue following into the winter. A lot of kids say that it's unfair that they aren't able to go on the bus even if they don't meet the 2-mile limit, because they happen to live 1.5 miles or 1.9, and they feel it's unfair if they don't get to ride a bus because a lot of them have younger siblings who they have to get to and pick up and have a lot of work to do, and them not being able to take care of them and being able to come on time to school is a big issue to them, especially in the following winter, because walking to and from school is going to be a big issue, especially with accidents happening. Another issue that we have is access to bathrooms. Yeah, we feel so a lot of students have come to me and told me that there's been a restriction in our school where there's only a couple of kids that are let into the bathroom at a time, but it seems as though that out of the 3 floors that we have, there only 1 floor is able to be used, and a lot of adults seem to kick out the kids, and a lot of them have been coming to me and telling me that they feel as though school has kind of become like a prison because you're not able to use the bathroom. And they feel like the other bathroom on other floors should be opened up so they can use them, because lines are really long and you have to skip class for a very long time just to go to the bathroom. And they're not skipping, but they're missing out on important lessons. And they just feel as though those are a couple things that need to be fixed. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Elney, and welcome aboard, and we look forward to maybe at some point seeing you in person. Mrs. Rizzo.
Thank you.
You did an incredible job, and you spoke very well and represented the other students very well. Can you just tell me when you meet with your advisors? Or when
I
the
haven't been
student
able
council?
to meet with. Can you hear me?
Yes.
When you say advisors, do you mean my advisory?
No, your student council? Are you on the student council?
Yes. No, I'm the representative of the Students' Council, and I haven't been able to meet with the council yet.
And do they meet each month, or is the plan to meet each month?
Yes.
And who is your advisor for this student council?
It is, please give me a moment to check. I think it's Robin Panzini.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much for your help, and hopefully some of the issues can be alleviated somehow. Just
Thank
keep
you.
working hard at that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Rizzo. Any other members? Okay, seeing none. Thank you again, Elney. We will move on now to the superintendent report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And we'll start with Mr. Frank Shea, who's here. As you all know, he's the Director of Athletics as well as Health and Physical Education. And he is going to give us an update tonight on a couple of different aspects of that programming, including the hockey program, which has changed somewhat this year, as well as the wellness work that we've been doing. And I'll just get his presentation up while you start and say hello, Frank.
Good evening and thank you for having me. Tonight I'm here, as the superintendent said, to discuss 3 areas. One is a new position, the second is a new initiative, and the third is a change in the status of our hockey program. We're delighted to have added a mindfulness coaching position, which is a K-12 position. And we hired Madeline Savalas-Wilkerson, who's been fantastic so far in this role. And she's actually enlightened me as to what mindfulness actually is. I had a totally different view of what mindfulness was before when it was just presented to me, but as you see it on my first slide, mindfulness is the practice of heightening awareness of oneself, noticing one's emotional, mental, and physical state without judgment. The position is designed to support all teachers in the areas of self-care, social emotional learning, growth mindset, positive classroom management, equity and culturally responsive teaching. The goal of the program is to collaborate with teachers in developing and strengthening their own personal mindfulness practice in order to develop and strengthen a mindfulness practice in the classroom. And then a statement that she gave me was, when students practice mindfulness, they become more engaged in their learning, they take more risks, they communicate more effectively, and are more emotionally connected to themselves and their community. So she's begun her work, and we really look forward to, being in this COVID world. I think this is a much needed position, not only for our students, but for some of our educators to be able to reach their students in this way.
Frank, can I just ask, is that new addition, which is fantastic, is she doing one of the workshops at the November?
At the MIA?
No, is she doing one there?
No, I'd like to get her to do one.
Yeah, good. The professional development, because it was one of the first ones I went to sign up with, and it was already booked. So I got blocked out. But I think it's a great position, and I can't wait to meet her and learn from her. I need it.
Our second bit of information deals with our wellness committee. Last year, as you know, we were completing our wellness audit, and at the end of last school year, we were focusing on nutrition and physical activity, which were the 2 big building blocks of our wellness policy. This year, we're going to review the results and recommendations from our recent behavioral health audit, and we'll try to implement necessary next steps into our future policy. In addition to that, this year's focus will be on adding programs to include mental health and substance abuse. These are 2 areas that we identified as a committee as high priorities to be added to our policy. Although the state doesn't determine that we need them in our policy, we felt as a committee that these 2 areas should be needed. So we're going to do expansive work on those 2 rocks. And the goal is to go from our current 2 big rocks and expand to 4 so that we have them in our policy for our next policy review. We've also expanded our committee to include citywide members from the SUDI office, MGH, and City Hall to help us accomplish this goal. In our third area I would like to discuss with you is our ice hockey co-op. As you know, for the past 8 years, Revere has been in a co-op with Malden High School due to lack of participation in both schools. Mattnon High School joined our co-op the past two seasons to enhance our participation numbers, and we were also able to offer a sub-varsity program. All during these 8 years, Revere was called the host school. And what the host school is all kids represented in the program are under your school's name. Your school takes all the responsibilities to pay officials, pay your coaching staff, run the games, hire police details, and try to expand so that one of the members of the co-op can break away and create their own independent team. Unfortunately for both Revere and Malden, neither has been able to stir up that type of participation over an 8-year period. Mattnon High School has left our co-op and actually did what most co-ops were designed to do. In the 2 years, they built up their program to a position where they could get away from us and go on their own. But if you know the history of Mattnon hockey, they were dominant in the 80s, and the fact that they were even part of our co-op was shocking to a lot of people. So we had a great relationship with Mattnon, and we hope and wish for them to succeed in the future. Consistently over the time of this 8-year period, our numbers have declined from a high of 18 participants to a projected number of 5 to 7 players for this upcoming season. So looking at those numbers, looking at Mattnon leaving the co-op, Everett High School, who had reached out a number of years ago to join, actually reached out again, and the timing couldn't have been better for us, in my opinion. With Everett joining the co-op, we again would be able to operate what hopefully will be a multi-tiered program with JV level players. And part of this co-op with Everett High School is they would receive the host status. So we would just simply transfer host status to Everett. There were some concessions made. We would retain one coach, and that coach is Brandon Pizzuto, who was our junior varsity coach for a number of years. Does a great job, and he was anxious and excited to have the opportunity to stay on board. Some of the questions you may ask is, will any Revere students be turned away or not be offered the opportunity to play? And that's no. With the current situation of numbers between Revere, Malden, and Everett, we'll be anywhere from 32 to 38. That's the projection. So it looks like we'll be able to skate a full varsity program and have an additional junior varsity team. And that's paramount because you want your younger kids to develop and play against younger players. Putting the younger kids up to the varsity too early is not the best situation for safety reasons and for development, skill development. So currently, Revere will have the lowest participation in the co-op, so it just made sense with our head coach moving on and us being alone with Malden to invite Everett in, and Everett to maintain host status. Also part of the agreement was if the numbers do swing back to either Malden or Revere, that the option would be there to transfer the host status either back to us or to Malden. From a cost perspective, Revere will pay 1/3 of the total ice. Revere will retain one coaching position, and Everett will assume all other costs at this time. So just generally, in the past several years, Revere has paid $15,000 for a coaching staff. That now moves to $4,500. We've paid around $2,000 a year in police details. That figure goes away. We've paid about $2,500 to game workers. That figure goes away. We also paid for transportation. I don't have that number, but that was approximately 10 to 12, 13 buses a year. And the ice remains about the same because we split the cost last year with Mattnon and Malden. The only negative, we lose about $6,000 in gate receipts, but at the end of the day, it's still about an $11,000 gain for us, with the hopes that in the future, we can double our numbers again, and either retain that host status or break off on our own. But if you look at the 8 to 10 years in the past with a lot of urban schools, this is the way that they're going, because the participation just is not where it has been years ago due to a lot of its private school education and the independent league school education with hockey and around hockey. It's a different animal, it's a different mindset, and you see a lot of just schools that are specifically hockey schools now popping up, so. But I think, you know, speaking for Dr. Kelly, we want to make clear we're not getting rid of hockey. And no one will be turned away. Of course, if the talent level is not there and it's a safety issue, they'll be turned away. But we don't want to turn anybody away from either a JV spot or a varsity spot.
And I'll just add, Frank, when you and I spoke about this, that there's hope of even, if not this year, in the future, having a freshman team, which would help expand the program even further. And that's what benefits us by being in this larger group with other districts, is it really gives our kids opportunities that they wouldn't have if we didn't join the co-op.
Correct. Also involved in the co-op, Mystic Valley is also part of the co-op with Everett. They had their own arrangement, but like Dr. Kelly says, their biggest piece of participation is if we were to offer a freshman or junior varsity team, they would run that ice payment and take care of that situation on their own. So that's where we're at.
Any members have any questions or comments? Mr. Sinella.
I'm a little perplexed if we're gonna have 5 students or 5 players, and they're gonna have the majority, why are we paying a third for ice time?
That was always the deal that we had.
Well, that was always, this is something new. I mean, let's look at reality. You're talking $4,500 for a coach, you're talking a third ice time, bus transportation, insurance, et cetera, et cetera. It's nice that you still have a policy or a program, and now you're hitting us with Mystic, whatever the other school was. They've got their own program, they're paying for their ice, but they're not paying for our ice. Will we be allowed to use their ice time?
Yes. We're going to save between $11,000 and $12,000. We're not paying for any transportation. The transportation is going to be paid for by Everett High School. All we're going to pay is a third of the ice cost, which is usually around $22,000.
And $4,500
And
for
$4,500 for the coach.
For 5 kids.
5 to 7. I mean, we hope that a few more skaters come out, but when you're looking at Malden and you're looking at Everett, they only have 8 or 9 kids themselves.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mrs. Sinella. Mrs. Rizzo.
So, Frank, I mean, it's sad that we have to go this way, but our demographics has changed, and then even with COVID, some of our students that were hockey players went on to private schools, did not come back. So there's been a number of different things that come into play with us losing hockey players. Have you been thinking of any other programs that perhaps may fit the demographics of our students with all the savings that you have now, like even a wrestling team or?
I mean, we did just add boys volleyball in the spring. And those other sports we're open to right now, but there's a big equipment and space problem with wrestling. Right now, if we have anyone who would be able to wrestle, they can join with Everett. So all the GBL schools kind of have created this co-op, so we're not going to deny anybody who may be an outlier, who may be a gymnast, who may be a wrestler. We will find a place for them within the Greater Boston League.
That's wonderful to know. If no one has any other questions, I'd like to make a motion to support Frank Shea his suggestion to join the hockey co-op with Malden and Everett being the host status.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Rizzo, seconded by Mr. Ferranti. Roll call.
Mrs. Bronston Rizzo,
Yes?
Mr. D'Ambrosio,
Yes.
Mr. Ferranti,
Yes.
Ms. Cavalisi,
Yes.
Mr. Sinella,
Yes.
Ms. Ty,
Yes.
Mayor Rigo.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, may I
Oh, Ms.
ask,
Ty.
may I ask Mr. Shea a question regarding another team? Frank, I don't want to put you on the spot, of course, but I've been hearing about unintended negative consequences of Title IX, particularly in regard to field hockey. I think 2 weeks ago, I looked in the journal for all of the papers, and it seems that on the other team, every player was a boy. And I know that we once had a girl on the football team. That's going to happen very, very seldom. But field hockey, I know if there's no other team, this is where they go, but it just seems to me that it is so unfair, given the type of body that teenagers have. Girls, there's no way girls can develop the same muscle strength that boys can. I'm just asking, is there any discussion anywhere about doing this? For example, I remember last year I read that on some team they had all boys, I'm not sure the rules of field hockey, but they had all boys on the line and the one girl was a goalie. And they came and played our kids, and there's no way you can win that way. It just seems to me to be, and I was in favor of Title IX, of course, I mean, and our kids benefited enormously by Title IX, by having the teams and so forth. But it seems to me that on an individual team, is there any way we can deal with that difficulty?
Let me give you a little bit of what happened and how the MIA has kind of addressed the problem. We feel like because of COVID and because kids were not active, the state got caught a little bit by surprise at the number of boys who came out for field hockey. And we try to attribute that to just kids trying to do something. But what happened is in the past you would have 2 boys and everybody else was a female, right? So that was kind of sustainable and nobody said anything. Last year we had an inordinate number of boys on the field at the same time. Though it wasn't illegal to do that, what the MIA has done is they have created a boys field hockey exploratory, so that they're exploring with schools that want to offer this program. So the hope is that in another year or 2, they will be able to separate the boys from the girls completely. Much like we did here at the high school with volleyball. So we had a girls volleyball team for several years. We'd have 1 or 2 boys. And when the boys play up close to the net, that was a big advantage. So the MIA adjusted the rules so that the boys couldn't play up to the net. And now we were able to spark enough interest to have a boys team. So now the girls are separated from the boys. So that is an option we would have here. Although we have not had any interest in boys playing on our girls' teams. It just so happens that Everett and Malden have. And it does create an unfair advantage, but it is within the rules, unfortunately.
It just seems so unfair to me.
I agree. So the hope is
To
that,
everyone, I think, but.
so the hope is that next year Malden and Everett will have boys' teams, and that problem will go away.
Yeah, I think it was Malden that, the game I was thinking
Yes.
of.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Any other members?
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you, Frank.
Great.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Frank.
Dr. Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next, we have Dr. Perella, who is rejoining us to give a presentation on some work that's happening at the high school, particularly around the teaching and learning update, which he mentioned in his previous presentation briefly, and also on competency-based learning. So, Dr. Perella, I am going to bring up your presentation if you want to say hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody. It's good to see you again. I want to thank you for this opportunity to share with you some updates on teaching and learning at Revere High School. I also want to thank Ellie for her awesome representation. She's a wonderful person, and it's always a pleasure to follow Mr. Shea in any presentation. So we'll begin with the second slide, which basically is sort of just a review of what CBL is. And I know that CBL is something, competency-based learning is something that the district has been investing in and implementing over the past, I would say, 8 years. And it is a system of teaching and learning, it's not just learning, that really is innovative. It is something that we think holds a lot well, supports students in a variety of different ways. And we're very excited to continue this implementation this year. The next slide, Dr. Kelly, please. Again, the first two slides are really sort of just a review of a lot of this information and what CBL really stands for and what it emphasizes. And that is student learning expectations and transparency in all that we do as educators and teachers and students. And this is not something that is regulated only to the high school, but also is being utilized in the middle schools. And I believe many components of it are also being utilized in the elementary school. But tonight I'd like to talk to you specifically about what we're focusing on in this year. And you can go to the next slide, Dr. Kelly, please. So there are 5 very general principles that drive competency-based learning and teaching. And they are that learning expectations are explicit, that students need to know what they're doing and why they're doing it, that revision is an essential component of learning. In the past, in more of a traditional view, revisions were not utilized. We basically said that if you didn't get the first try, then unfortunately you failed. We do know that in every other capacity of humanity, that trying again is an essential piece of that puzzle. Teachers and students recognize that there are many ways to show competency. There's not just one answer, even though there can be one answer, but it's not just one way of showing that you understand what that answer is. And that pedagogy needs to focus on these complex skill sets in critical thinking that includes problem solving and analysis. And the last piece is that habits of work are an essential skill in a standalone piece to teaching and learning. So this year, in the next slide, please. This year, we are really focusing, again, this is a continuation of years of work and investment from the district. And we are really focusing on digging into these principles in each of the semesters and then utilizing what we call instructional rounds to see how they look in practice, really support teachers in utilizing them, and also work with students as well. So the first principle, of course, is learning expectations are explicit. So we are already doing instructional rounds, which includes a variety of stakeholders, administrators. We will be adding lead teachers, as well as all the teaching staff to play a role in this. We are starting off slow with sort of the administrators at first. And what we do is we go around and we look for, are learning expectations explicit in the classroom? We've already engaged in this, and we're now starting to dig into Principle 2 about revisions, and the rounds that we will engage in this semester will include looking for both revision opportunities for students, as well as that expectations are explicit. Then in semester 2, we're doing more of the same, except on the principles 3, 4, and 5. And our hope is that by the end of semester 2, and this is what we're planning for, we will then plan on adopting what we call school-wide core competencies. And core competencies are basically what students need to know, understand, and be able to do. And we hope to also celebrate an annual CBL day at the end of the year as really appreciation for the hard work that educators are putting into this every single day. This is sustained by our PLGs, our lead teachers, our CBL meetings that happen every other week. Teachers are engaging in this extremely challenging, really paradigm shift in teaching and learning And we are very happy to see that we're progressing this year. And with this plan, we hope to complete the year and really have a stronger foundation for these principals. And one last thing I just want to mention is that, CBL is looked upon as an instructional technique, but really it is couched in the need for equity, and that within this, we believe that equity isn't just something, a standalone idea, but it really needs to be embedded in instruction. And CBL really significantly allows us to do that by looking at each student as a human, and really cultivating their innate brilliance and working with their skills and individual needs. And that's sort of what we're working on this year, and I wanted to just share that information with you, and I'm available for any questions you may have about this progress.
Any members have any questions? Mrs. Rizzo.
Yes, Dr. Perella, have you had, I know it's been a tough couple of years introducing CBL, even though we've done it in many places in the system, but have you found that there's more buy-in from the educators, the families, and the students with the hopes that it will go better this year?
I think it's, anytime we're asking anyone, educators and families and students, to rethink what they were trained to believe in education, I think that's a challenging thing to do. And none of this work is easy. It's in fact, it's very difficult. And we believe it's worth it, of course. So to answer your question, I do think that there is increased buy-in. I think one of the problems with us rolling it out last year is it got conflated with sort of our efforts to address remote teaching and learning. And there was some confusion about, is this a CBL approach, or is this really sort of an intervention to support students during remote teaching and learning when they weren't in the building? So that kind of, I would say in hindsight, maybe slowed us down a little bit. We believe this year with support and work and professional development from Great Schools Partnerships that we have in place, and all the other systems that have been implemented with lead teachers, coaches, STEM Center, and the Writing Center, that we have an abundance of resources and supports to help us push this forward. It's going to continue to be a challenge, and it's not something that will be done this year or next year. In fact, I think Dr. Kelly mentioned this before, a real vision for what CBL looks like will probably outlive all of us, at least not outlive, but maybe in our careers, professional careers, in these positions.
Thank you, Dr. Perella.
Thank you, Mrs. Rizzo. Any other members? Ms. Tai.
Dr. Perella, it would seem to me that the result of this, or maybe as a result of this, we certainly would have to rethink, or the state would certainly have to rethink the way it gives the Mcas, and that would have to be changed dramatically because it simply wouldn't fit, I think, with the principal. Do you agree or not? Would that be an important thing that would have to be done?
I think so. I think, if we consider the principle that there are many ways to show competency, that kind of flies directly in the face of the MCAS test, which basically states, for the most part, that students have to show competency through this one exam. There are exceptions, of course, for sometimes for special ed students, but in general, students need to pass this one test, a standardized test that in order to graduate. And I think that's really the challenge, is that CBL is at times it is not does not work smoothly with the standardization movement and the standardization expectations. Because this view of teaching and learning basically presents that there is no one way to do things, that there are many ways to do things, and that we need to really nurture that approach to get students to meet their potential. So to answer your question, Ms. Tai, I think that I think that there needs to be some shifting of how the state looks at testing and expectations from schools. Yes.
If I may, one of the objections that I hear sometimes is that competency-based tests are too subjective, and something like the Mcas can put everybody, if everybody has to pass the same way or everyone has to do it the same way, then at least you'd be judging people by the same yardstick. It would seem to me that there are many yardsticks that we could use to do it. Do you see that as a problem?
I would agree with what you just said. I think there are many yardsticks that we can tell if a student knows the material or not. And you see this every day, where some students shine in sort of oral presentations or in sort of artistic approaches to answering and presenting information, and others, can do it so in the more traditional writing a narrative of that.
Yeah.
So there's lots of ways for students to show that they know material, and I think if when we restrict what they can do and how they can show it, it really dims the light and the opportunity for them to shine.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Tai. Any other members?
Brian?
Mr. Sinella.
Unrelated to what was mentioned, I asked if he would be back. If Dr. Perella, if you could kind of put at rest stories of children, students at the high school not having their identification, coming into the school without identification. Is there any truth to that, or that you're knowledgeable of, or is it another one of these rumors that just has a life of its own?
So we've spent a lot of energy and time, specifically the past 2 weeks, ensuring that all students got their IDs. One of the challenges at the beginning of the year is that we had to schedule all 1,800 students for new IDs, because the pitches that we had, a lot of them were from 6th grade pitches, and that they didn't really support anything that we were trying to do. So we had to schedule all of our students to get pitches taken, and then we gave out all those IDs. And in the past 2 weeks, what we've been doing is we check IDs at the door, and for any student that hasn't had the ID, we give them an opportunity to get a free ID. We just communicated to students this week that unfortunately those days of free IDs are coming to an end, and there will be a small cost for students to wear IDs. Wearing IDs is always a challenge. It's like everything. Students will, if given the opportunity, take it off. So we do, so I spend a lot of time during the day walking around the halls asking students not only to make sure that their masks are on, but that their IDs are shown. So IDs are a part of what we do, and we also, faculty has to wear them as well. It's part of how we do school.
Well, I think that answers the question. The 2 weeks of getting their new ones, possibly they didn't have it, they came in, so you've addressed that issue. And that in the last 2 weeks, you've tightened up the wearing of them, and you're to be commended and your staff, and I'm glad that that's put to rest. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mrs. Sinella. Dr. Kelly, want to continue on?
I'll just thank Dr. Perella for his presentation, and we'll see you tomorrow, John. Thank you.
Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on the superintendent's report is a little review of the Mcas results that we had from this year. And Dr. Mokaba is going to share this presentation. I thank her for putting it together. And I just want to say before she begins that we need to, as I always say, and the committee's probably heard me say too many times, especially Brian, having been in my math class, that data absent context is meaningless. And the context around this data is that the tests were administered when we were literally in the middle of a pandemic. Kids had only been back to school physically for a couple of weeks when we started the assessments, and the results to us are not a surprise, given the context that our students and our staff were dealing with. So I'll leave it at that and pass it over to Dr. Mokaba.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly, and it's like you read my first slide. As Dr. Kelly had said, it's important that we acknowledge where we were. The test was given in the spring of 2021. Our students had literally just returned to a hybrid model late March and began testing in April. Some of our students who remained in full remote learning last year actually took the test from their homes, so this was a first for them as well. The important thing that I sort of want to couch this in is that we're looking at this data as providing us information about unfinished learning. I'm going to talk a little bit about how this aligns with the state initiative for their acceleration roadmap. And our goal really is to use this data as one piece of information to guide our teaching and to inform our work with students moving forward. So the focus of DESE this year is to accelerate learning. And the department has compiled an acceleration roadmap that they've provided all districts. And we're fortunate in Revere that many of our practices that we have been using over the years are already part of the fabric of what we do. We know, and we've talked even today about the importance of supporting students' sense of belonging. We've increased staff to support students and families with this ongoing work. We've increased training opportunities to support students that were identified in our district's behavioral health audit. And we have, as you have heard from presentations from our curriculum directors, we are in the process right now of refining and implementing a phased rollout for several new curriculum resources. The second part of this is that educators are receiving professional development to support their use of data-informed instruction. Our data cycles have always been part of our practice here in Revere, but they are even more important now as we look to finish the learning in many ways and in many of the areas that the Mcas test has identified for us. Strong instruction is the final leverage point, and our educators are working to fine-tune their lesson and unit plans, develop standards-based formative and summative assessments, and implement interventions that provide those just-in-time supports that our students need at different points throughout the year. A team of administrators are participating with me in the Learning Acceleration Network, and we will be meeting with curriculum leaders from across the state to gather and share best practices. In addition to this data, before we jump into it, we will be looking closely at our subgroup populations. All of our teachers will have our access data for our English learners, and that's going to paint a broader picture of where our students are at. So on the next slide, you can see our grade 3 and grade 4 students. And we chose not to provide a comparison to the state. We were actually told that comparing to the state is not important. What we want to look at is sort of where our students are given this context. So as you can see, overall, there was a decline. Our students didn't do as well as we would have hoped. Our students did perform better overall at all grade levels on ELA than they did in math. You can see, so third grade, just as an example, 33% of our students were meeting expectations, 52% were partially meeting, and 10% of our third graders were not meeting expectations in ELA. We know we have a lot of work to do and areas of focus. When we look at mathematics, that picture is a little more bleak, but again, I'm going to talk about what we're doing. So we've got 48% of our third graders are partially meeting expectations, 21% were meeting, and 1% of the district was exceeding. One of our early data dives, we looked at some of our elementary schools, and I can just point out the Whalen. We looked at the number of students who were either 1, 2, or 3 raw score points away from meeting expectations in math. So these students are on the cusp. They're almost there. In grade 3 at Whalen, for example, 18.4% of their students were on the cusp. And that's promising. Grade 4, 10%, and grade 5, 9%. This provides us with solid, actionable data when we dive even deeper into the areas that they have met that we can use to support their learning. Our goal would be to provide students with targeted interventions to support them in meeting the expectations at the end of this year. One of the things just to highlight is that with these additional interventionist positions that we were able to add at all levels, the addition of the consulting teachers that were talked about, our instructional coaches, and the implementation of our new reading and writing programs K2, and our math program being rolled out this year in K4, in 4 and 5. We are hopeful, we're confident that we can use this time and use our teacher expertise to sort of finish some of this unfinished learning. Grade 5, you can see on this slide I have ELA, math, and science. So science was given in grades 5 and grade 8. You can see that the ELA, again, mimicked similarly grade 3 and grade 4. We had 42% of our students partially meeting expectations, 34% meeting expectations, and 5% exceeding. Mathematics, 52% were partially meeting, 15% were meeting expectations, and 1% was exceeding. That left us with 32% of our 5th graders not meeting expectations quite yet in mathematics.
And Dr. Mocaba, I know that the individual schools are drilling down to the student level and identifying which students in each of the subject areas are going to be provided with these additional interventions. So I don't know if we read all the numbers, if we just talk to the good points that you're making about the interventions.
And just a reminder about the grade 5 specifics. Dr. Costa presented previously at the school committee meeting some of the strengths of our new curriculum. It's student focused, and there are very strong instructional routines in inquiry-based lessons there to support our students, and there are, it is intentionally designed with UDL in mind to remove barriers to learning. There are a variety of ways to assess students, and there are strong mathematical language routines. So we feel like that we have a good, solid resource to support us as we tackle this year. I can talk, so thinking about the CUSP kids that I had brought up earlier, we have seen at the Hill School, for example, 18 CUSP students. So students who are in the area of science, almost there, with that would be 14.2% of their population. We anticipate we'll be able to bring up to that meeting expectations the next time they take that. So grade 6 and 7, you've heard the middle school, these students, some of them were not in school since the 4th grade. If we think about what we're asking our middle school students, it's not a surprise that they struggled a little bit on this test. Again, you're going to see the same trends in the data, and I won't dig into the specific numbers. You'll also see that students perform better on ELA than math. One thing I want to highlight, Dr. Porter had presented the GLEAM grant that we received, and part of that, we're going to be strengthening our core level of instruction for all of our students. And after this year, we will have a very clear direction and very clear idea of how we provide Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports to our students who are identified in needing of that intervention. So in addition to having these new interventions, we will have a very clear and specific plan how to address the curriculum needs of these students. Grade 6 and 7, again, we had these CUSP students, so I can talk about math at Garfield Middle. 7% of their 6th graders were on the CUSP, 13.5% of their 7th graders, and 9.2% of their 8th graders. So again, that's some of the data that we will be taking back to individual classrooms and doing some targeted work to support those learning gaps. Another point I want to bring up is that all of our middle schools have academic strategies, those smaller classes where they are able to do small group instruction to support students, and this was a priority given COVID last year. Grade 8, again, you'll see that ELA, math, and science, similar trend, same sort of struggles. These students, as Dr. Perella had highlighted, are now in the 9th grade, and we'll be working on getting them ready for the 10th grade MCAS test. Grade 10, Grade 10 was a little bit of a highlight. Right now, the Revere High School building teams are digging into this data, as Dr. Kelly had pointed out. In comparison, you can make a little bit of a comparison to the 2019 data. We saw an 8% increase in students earning exceeding expectations in ELA. We saw a 10% increase in students with disabilities meeting expectations. We saw a 7% increase in students earning partially meeting expectations. And here, the new literacy coach is working with the staff and Dr. Porter. They feel hopeful that there's a lot of potential to support these students for their retakes. 1% increase in our students who are not meeting expectations. But again, here with that cusp, 23% of our students who scored partially meeting were only 1 to 3 points away, raw score points away. So there is takeaways here that provide us with data where we can complete some of the learning. At the high school in particular, the newly created math coach position is going to be crucial in supporting our teachers doing some of this work. The STEM Center will serve as a resource for teachers as we identify where students have room to grow. And as Dr. Perella had mentioned, the CBL work is ongoing and will dovetail nicely as we work to identify standards, power standards, and to support our students in mastering content. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Any members? Mr. Franti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Danielle, just quickly explain the difference between meeting and partially meeting expectations. You seem to put an emphasis on that when you were making your presentation. Just tell us what really the difference is, if there is one.
Yep, so this is based on their cut scores. What we want to see is students meeting expectations. It's the old notion of proficient. We want all of our students to fall into that category of meeting expectations. Partially meeting is equivalent to that in needs of improvement, hasn't demonstrated mastery on all standards. So what, as Dr. Kelly had mentioned, what the leadership teams in the buildings are doing is looking specifically at what standards did these children miss, what what lessons can they use and weave into the next grade. We know in ELA and math, there's a lot of building and content, fundamental content that needs to happen here. So, and skills that they're going to work on to support the students now who were in the 3rd grade or now in the 4th grade, and so on.
Yeah, but can't you like take these scores and put a big asterisk next to it because what's happened the last 2 years?
Of course.
So it's really hard to take this data
Yep.
compared 2 years ago because it's going to be like night and day.
Exactly, and that's why we don't want to, we're presenting the data because it's our responsibility to present you with the data, but what we want to take from it is that there are places we know we can target and improve. There's a lot of unfinished learning, there's a lot of other things, as everybody has mentioned earlier in presentations. We have to take care of the social emotional well-being of these kids, we've got to get them back into routines, but we do have, we're positioned very well in terms of staffing, in terms of resources, curriculum resources, and the work that has happened that our staff has been doing to support these students to build them up.
Thank you.
If I can just add to that, it's a really good point that you made, Mr. Franti, because I think it's important for parents at home to understand the context of this data as well, and to not look at the reports that you're going to get in the next week or so and think that it means there's a problem with your child's learning. We are where we are because we all just endured a very traumatic and difficult time in society, and no one's child is further behind or lost or anything compared to anyone else. We're using this data to understand where each individual child is and giving each one the individualized support that they need in order to move forward and be successful academically. So please don't take it as a negative on yourself as a parent or on your child if you see results that aren't quite what you're used to seeing. It's perfectly okay right now.
Ms. Ty.
Well, I'm not sure the basis of the data that I'm going to talk about, but someone sent me a link today to the new U.S. News and World Report, and I went through and saw, we did not have, they measured elementary school and middle school. we did not have any school in the top 25. And that's what they were touting, like where's the top 25? And of course, the top 25 were all from very wealthy communities. But to me, the news that they had for Revere was outstanding, because the Beechmont School came out the highest, which is no surprise because it has the lowest class size. And every single grade in that was there was one that was met expectations, and all of the others were like astoundingly met expectations or did much better than supposed to. And in many of those, so the vast majority of them, when I compared the graph to Revere and the state, we were above the state. Not a lot above, but in many of them. Now, we still didn't make the top 25, but I thought it was really satisfying to see and to know how hard our teachers work, and that they have been successful. And I think the smaller class size in the past has made a huge difference, really a huge difference. And I'll look forward myself to reading about the middle schools and see where that is. But that was a great article that you might want to take a look at, because it is certainly Revere proud. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ty. Dr. Kelly will continue on.
Thank you. I have
report.
one more report, and I think it will be a brief one. I just wanted to update the committee on the results of our community survey regarding the spending on the Esser grant. And you can see the survey results are in the packet that you received. We had 706 respondents. They broke down differently along subgroup lines in terms of if it was staff members or community members, students, and we also had a group of parents, thankfully. In fact, more than half were parents who replied. So we took a look at where the items broke out in each of the different categories that we surveyed folks on. The first was enhancing core instruction. And for the most part, there's a lot of consistency among the different stakeholder groups. But it was interesting to me to see that students and parents thought we needed new instructional materials much more than staff and community members do. And so as we looked at this data, we understood that by breaking it out this way, we can see the different priorities of different groups, which is important to inform our decision making. Overall, what you see in this report, I should clarify that what this data is the percentage of each group who identified that item as one of their top three. So you can read this as overall 66% of people who responded thought that instructional materials were either the most important, the second most important, or the third most important thing that we needed to focus on. And you can read through the rest of the data to see how that all falls out. There are some interesting pieces, as I mentioned, like interventionists and writing staff. We feel like were really important to making sure we could give kids the scaffolds that they needed this year coming back from COVID. The staff agreed with us, but parents, community, and students, not so much. And so it's interesting to see people's different perspectives on how all of these pieces fall out. And what we're going to try to do is meld the program so that we can support the primary needs of all of the stakeholder groups, not leave anyone's ideas about what's important outside of our programming or our planning. And so I'll just run through these slides. For targeted student supports, co-teaching and inclusion models were identified as the most important. Vacation and summer enrichment came in second overall, significantly more important to parents than it is to staff. Also not surprising, the staff need their summer vacation and they know it falls on them to run these summer and vacation programs. So with their exhaustion, I'm not surprised by that at all. I'll roll on to the next category, which was talent development and staffing. And again, here we see some significant differences. Parents and students felt like the coaching and C2C programs were very important compared to community at large and staff. Still, this was the highest rated piece overall. And I do wonder if some parents and students didn't think of coaching as football coaching and hockey coaching and programs like that, as opposed to math coaches and literacy coaches and mindfulness coaches, which is how we meant it. And, you know, that's one of the things about a survey is you always find the flaws afterward when you analyze the data and look at where there might be some misrepresentations. But it's very significant here as well that when we talk about the equity work, and we've been doing this in our schools for a number of years now, you can see a unique trend here where 77% of students said that was really important and we need to focus on it. It's significantly more than what any other stakeholder group thought. But it's our students speaking to us. And you see a similar trend in the next line item with teacher PLG, and that's when teachers get to collaborate with each other, which is obviously very important to teachers, but no other groups rated it very high. And that's likely because they don't engage in PLG the way a teacher does, so they don't necessarily understand the value of it. In our final grouping, we looked at conditions for student success, including social, emotional, and mental health supports. And you can see the findings here. Across the board, and with a significant difference, everybody is looking for more guidance counselors, more nurses, and more social workers. So that remains a drive for us. Parents, more than anyone else, appreciate the parent liaisons and the reconstructing that we're working on at the Parent Information Center. And you can read the other items there. I think the one other one that I will highlight is the facilities improvements that our staff are looking for more than anybody else. And then the last thing we asked folks to tell us is if there was anything else they thought we should be focused on. And naturally, there were a lot of different responses to this. There were over 400, in fact, from the 700 people who took the survey. And so we did a Wordle with these. We took their responses, and some people had long explanations, and some people just had a one-word answer. And we tried to classify those into groups, and you can see them here. And what you see is the larger the lettering for each topic, the more people who said we need to focus on that. And you can see right across the middle, extracurricular activities have been identified as the most important, followed by special education programs, sports, EL supports, better lunch. I'll be talking to Ms. Cole about that. But there's a lot of different ideas here. And I'm just thankful to everybody who took the time to fill out the survey, and it really will drive our work going forward. So we do appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mrs. Rizzo.
Any members have any questions or comments? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the report of subcommittees. Mrs. Rizzo.
Are you losing your voice as we sit here?
Where are you, Revere?
Is that
Okay, first item is the Mass Association of School Committees resolutions. And I'm not going to read each one. I sent out the packet. Hopefully you got it in the mail also. Some of the resolutions talk about the homework gap and the Wi-Fi access that we found very important after the pandemic. IDEA Full Funding Act. One of the resolutions was on recess. Alternative to Mcas, zero tolerance policies, school committees and receiverships, electric school buses, and prohibiting the use of Native American mascots. So at this point, I'm asking for a motion to accept this as a slate to pass at the delegate assembly.
Second.
Roll call?
Mrs. Brunson Rizzo?
Yes?
Could I ask a question?
Ms. Ty.
Resolution number 7, which I found fascinating because the only receivership I've ever known has been Chelsea. And I was wondering if there was some move to do more receivership?
We have 3 school districts in the state that are under receivership. And unfortunately, part of this is because, they put you in receivership and expect you to get out of it within 5 years. And if you look at Holyoke, they've been in there 10 years.
Really?
And no help. And they keep sending these receivers. Well, they had Steve Reich, who was very good. He ended up going to the Salem school system, which I can't blame him. But then they send in some of these other people that, I hate to say what they've been doing, but unfortunately for these districts, it's not helping them at all.
Yeah.
So this is in support of trying to work with them to get the legislative and DESE to, give it back to the city and town.
Mm-hmm. And I have to say, I certainly liked resolution number 9 prohibiting the use of Native American mascots. I don't know how much support that would get in throughout the state.
I will say, most of the state, most of our school districts have changed the name. I know where Chris Malone is right now, they changed one of their schools, and it's been well received in quite a few places.
But if you drive up Route 1, you see that.
Well, that's too bad that building's so brand new.
Yeah.
It's sad, but
It is
we're
sad.
getting there.
Yeah, okay. No, I support.
Okay, did we
We
do
had a
a roll
motion,
call?
we had a motion and a second, and we're in a roll call.
Mrs. Bronson Rizzo,
Yes?
Mr. D'Ambrosio, Mr. Ferranti.
Yes.
Ms. Gravellisi, Mr. Sinella,
Yes.
Ms. Ty,
Yes.
Mayor Rigo.
Yes.
Okay, the next one. So the school committee superintendent conference starts on Wednesday. And whether or not I win on the Tuesday, I will still be driving that long ride down to the Cape. And I am hoping that this committee would allow me to be a delegate for the assembly.
Of course, I move that we
Second.
nominate
Motion,
Rizzo.
motion presented by, Charles.
I was just gonna say, especially since you're gonna be the president.
And not if I don't win.
Motion presented by Ms. Ty to nominate Stacy Rizzo, and seconded by Mr. Sinella. We'll have a roll call.
Mrs. Bronson Rizzo,
Yes?
Mr. D'Ambrosio, Mr. Ferranti.
Yes.
Ms. Gravellisi, Mr. Sinella.
Yes.
Ms. Ty.
Yes.
Mayor Rigo.
Yes.
And the last item is, I am on the board of directors for the Shore Collaborative, and I had sent you all a copy of their capital plan. And this plan proposes to establish a capital reserve fund pursuant to the MGL 60350.7 for the purpose of maintaining and improving its capital assets. The Board of Directors of the Collaborative has approved the capital improvement plan outlined in the specific projects for which funds will be used, and has determined that the limit on this fund should be $3,542,750, with deposits to the fund will be made through the annual budget process as approved by the Board of Directors. Unfortunately, collaboratives are not eligible for Massachusetts School Building Association funds, nor are they eligible for any school improvement funds, for which the public school districts may be eligible. Therefore, the collaborative fund, their capital project independently, funds designated for the capital reserve fund will only be used for that purpose. So I request a motion to accept their capital plan.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Motion presented by Mr. Franti, seconded by Ms. Ty. Roll call.
Michael, can you read the
Wait,
motion?
I have a motion right here. I recommended vote to approve the establishment of a capital reserve fund not to exceed the balance of $3,542,750 for the implementation of the capital plan projects at Shore Education Collaborative. So moved.
Second.
Motion presented by Mr. Francie, seconded. Roll call.
Mrs. Bronson Rizzo?
Yes.
Mr. D'Ambrosio? Mr. Franti?
Yes.
Ms. Gravellisi? Mr. Sinella?
Yes.
Ms. Ty?
Yes.
Mayor Arrigo?
Yes. Now move on to motions.
So, in the absence of
Mrs.
Mr.
Rizzo.
D'Ambrosio, motion one, encumber $33,327.50 for the agreed final invoice PBO 69R1, owner project manager service from Hill International on the Hill, J.J. Hill School for the period from January 1st, 21 through the final project closeout with the MSBA. It is understood and agreed that this is the final invoice regardless of when the closeout occurs. So moved?
Second.
Roll call.
Mrs. Bronson Rizzo?
Yes?
Mr. D'Ambrosio? Mr. Franti?
Yes.
Ms. Gravellisi? Mr. Sinella?
Yes.
Ms. Ty?
Yes.
Mayor Arrigo?
Yes.
Second, approval
Mrs. Rizzo, your mic.
Approval of $33,327.50 for the agreed final invoice PBO 69R1 of owner project manager services from Hill International on the J.J. Hill School for the period from January 1st, 2021 through the final project closeout with the MSBA. It is understood and agreed that this is the final invoice regardless of when the closeout occurs. So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Mrs. Bronson Rizzo?
Yes?
Mr. D'Ambrosio? Mr. Franti?
Yes.
Ms. Gravellisi? Mr. Sinella?
Yes.
Ms. Ty?
Yes.
Mayor Arrigo?
Yes.
And we've already approved the next two at the committee of the whole, why we had Carl Benson here.
I don't know that you voted on D.
Well, to be safe, need a motion to request by Dr. Kelly that the committee vote on the accelerated repair project funding for the Beachmont Boiler Project. So moved.
Second. Roll call.
Mrs. Bronson Rizzo?
Yes?
Mr. D'Ambrosio? Mr. Ferranti?
Yes.
Ms. Gravellisi? Mr. Sinella?
Yes.
Ms. Ty?
Yes.
Mayor Arrigo?
Yes. Does the committee have any old or new business? Any school committee interests from any members? Okay, seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
Motion
moved.
to adjourn?
Roll call.
Mrs. Bronson Rizzo?
Yes?
Mr. D'Ambrosio? Mr. Ferranti?
Yes.
Ms. Gravellisi? Mr. Sinella?
Yes.
Ms. Ty?
Yes.
Mayor Arrigo?
Yes. The school committee will now adjourn.